Hello and welcome to the See You at BT series. Here we bring you up close and personal conversations with the crème de la crème of India's C-suite to fetch you pertinent industry insights and personal anecdotes. Today, Anand Adhikari, Managing Editor, Business Today magazine, is in conversation with Ravi Lambah, Head of Investment Group and Head of India at Temasek. Temasek is a global private equity player with a presence in India. Now, the subject matter of discussion is ESG, which stands for Environmental, Social and Governance. Today, financial performance alone is not sufficient for corporations. They have a broader responsibility to address social and environmental challenges as well. Let's dissect the components of ESG for you.
Thank you, Ravi, for giving us time. I just want to start with the governance of the ESG. The SEBI has recently amended the listing guideline, regarding the special rights and privileges enjoyed by certain shareholders. Now, SEBI says that, these special rights should be, subjected to shareholder, approval every 5 years, from the date of granting of such rights. I just want to know, how important and timely, is this move to strengthen the corporate governance in India? Let's start with that.
Sure, no, thank you. I think reforms and practices that increase transparency and improve governance are always welcome for financial investors. And at Temasek, we are very focused on corporate governance as an important aspect of our investing, as well as an important aspect of how we function ourselves. So I think these are all improvements that create more transparency. And as long as, from our perspective, as long as our investee companies comply with the laws and the regulatory requirements, we find increasing transparency beneficial to all stakeholders.
Okay. Is this move directed to PE or a VC, or is more towards maybe, let's say, the founders or the promoters? I mean, how do you see this?
I think I see this as an ongoing increasing transparency, increasing accountability, and improving the general, operating environment in which companies list and then operate after they're listed. Because it's a different environment when you're private. As a private company, you can have special rights, shareholding agreements in place.
Exactly.
That can, that give you a governance that is not the same as it should be when a company is listed.
Right.
And in order to make sure that the listed environment is consistent for all, transparent for all, and at the same time, if there are any such shareholding provisions, are approved by all shareholders, which is how it is in private companies. In private companies, you cannot enforce it. It has to still be approved by all shareholders.
Right.
In a private company, the same thing is being applied in the public market. So we see this as a positive move to increase transparency.
Okay. Now, coming back to this Kotak Committee, report on corporate governance, and the report talked about, separation of chairman and the MD and CEO. The response was very muted, and then it became very voluntary. I just want to know from you. I mean, what's the practice, globally, and how do you see, that separation part?
Actually, the practice globally differs from many different markets. At Temasek, our belief is that the role of a chairman in a board should be one of a non-executive chairman who looks very carefully at managing the board and bringing the board together and providing the right governance framework for management. So we, in our portfolio companies, we will always look towards separating the role of chairman and CEO.
Okay.
Where the chairman will be non-executive, ideally, and the CEO will be the executive.
Okay.
And in that manner, we feel that is the ideal form of governance for a company.
Okay. But any studies or anecdotal evidence to say that companies with this separation are better governed?
Yeah, I think it stems from the role itself. So if the chairman and the CEO are one role, then the role of the chairman, as we see it, is to provide guidance to the CEO. Right. Is to provide, to bring the board together and to sort of, provide governance framework to the CEO and the management team. And when it's non-executive role, a person who's a non-executive performing that role, clearly their approach is different as someone who's an executive running the company day to day.
Right.
And we also feel not just that, but there should be a sufficient representation of independence on the board as well, independent directors.
Right.
So combined with this, with non-executive chairman, a sufficient number of independents, and that number also differs, as you know, from market to market. Like in India, for a listed company, it's 50% have to be independent directors.
Right.
In some places, it has to be majority independent directors. Then that board itself will govern differently. And that's how governance is well established.
Okay. So do you invest your, you insist your investing company to separate the role wherever it is not? I mean, when you go and invest.
We always give guidance that that's the way we would like it to be. In some cases, it's done at the outset. Some cases, it's a journey because sometimes it takes time to find the right board construct and to find the right independent chairman and find the right, operating for a particular board.
Right. And so Indian companies are also operating on a global scale. I just want to know, how do you perceive the issue of succession planning in the promoter-driven, company? I'm sure you have seen them from very close quarters. So, any assessment?
Succession planning is a very critical component, as we see, of continuity in business. And typically, this role is performed in our portfolio companies by the board. The board plans for succession, and the board then looks at succession across different layers of senior members of the team, CEO, CFO, and CTO, etc. And this is, from our perspective, we look towards the boards to plan for succession.
Okay. Are there any best practices globally? How they have done succession planning? Promoter-driven company globally.
Typically in a family-driven company, succession, and if it's a listed business, with a construct like I talked about, independent chairman and all, then in that construct we will see many examples where professional CEOs may not be family members who are then sort of in the succession. It could be people already senior in the company, or they could be brought from outside after a proper search is done. So in a close-knit company where there's more family and less, typically, and it's not listed, it's probably done differently,
right?
Because it's not listed, so the governance framework is different. So I think we have to separate it too. If it's listed and it's got the framework we talk about, then typically the best person for the job is chosen and identified, and accordingly succession is done.
Right. And Ravi, how do you assess the role of this proxy advisory firm in India? Which is, let's say, the Glass Lewis and other, globally. You have investment in listed company, and there is a lot of advisory that come from these three proxy advisory firm in India.
The proxy advisory firms have played a role. It's a positive role in most cases, where they enable they kind of galvanize conversation, they galvanize focus, and if it's played well, we would regard it as a positive part of the whole, improving the governance and highlighting issues that are important for all stakeholders. So in that context, we see it as a positive development.
Okay, so I think on this executive compensation, that's where we have seen a lot of recommendation coming from these things. Have you also done any study on the compensation part? How that?
We haven't. I think when we look at very often when we are part of a board, and we are represented on the board with maybe a seat in the remuneration committee, etc., we will often look at this context of C-level compensation.
Okay.
And there will always be benchmarks done with peers.
Okay.
And then we think about it, and then we will make a recommendation. The compensation committee will come to a recommendation, right? Okay. So that's in an unlisted company.
Right.
In a listed company, the same thing happens. There's a compensation committee, and then they decide. Right. So ultimately, from our perspective, we leave the governance of these aspects to the board.
Right.
As a shareholder, we will often look at different, comments from these third-party external advisors who then compare, peer-for-peer comparison, and then come up with a view on executive pay. And we will look at that as an input as well, to come to our own view. So this is, again, I regard this as part of good governance. I regard this as part of, transparency on pay. Pay for performance is something obviously we advocate, and it should be comparable to what is correct for the market. And if it's not, then all of us should think about a way to correct it,
right?
Which is only fair for all stakeholders.
Right. And Ravi, coming to the S part, the social part, partly it is covered under the corporate social, responsibility, and there are guidelines also, spending 2% of their company's profit on CSR. How Indian companies are faring on diversity and inclusion? Maybe if you can focus there.
I think this is a journey for everyone. We even at Temasek, for example, we have just short of 50% of our entire workforce is women, and just sort of mid-50s is male. At the senior level, it's probably 75-25.
Oh, okay.
So we're also trying to improve our own journey, and this also comes from the context of companies have come from a particular place and they're trying to get to a particular place.
Right.
Obviously, the best person for the job should be the person that does the job. But we regard diversity, social and inclusion extremely important. We are always in favor of improving diversity across all our portfolio companies, including for ourselves. As like I said, for the whole firm as a whole, we are already, we're almost there.
Right.
So, it is a journey for us too, as it is for everyone.
Right. And Ravi, post-COVID, we have seen, this remote working, this hybrid, work models. Do you think that will contribute to better gender diversity? Any views there?
I think the work from home and the remote working is clearly here to stay in many different companies. How it will evolve over a period of time, we have to see. But I don't think that should be a reason for, or that should not be the way we achieve diversity. The way we achieve diversity has to be planned. You have to plan for diversity at the bottommost level and the senior-most level. We have to make the workplace a diverse workplace and encourage people to come to work, whether it's working from home or working in the office, in a manner that helps everyone, operate in a friendly, diverse environment, if I call it that. Yeah.
Right. And coming to the environmental, aspect, are they really getting integrated into the business strategy? Where are we on this, journey?
That's a great question. I think we often talk about it being a very important question for the planet as a whole,
right?
Just given the adversity that we're seeing right now. But from at Temasek, sustainability is at the core of what we do. So we have at every investment we make, it has to stand up for the ESG component of it. If it does not, we simply won't do the investment.
Okay.
Or we will do it provided we think we can make a difference to their ESG track record and improve it, so that the company's in a better place than it was before we invested. And the last thing I would say on this aspect, as we think about ESG in our businesses, we're finding that, again, as it is a path for everyone, a lot of people are now focused on it, and some are doing a lot of the things they say they want to do, and some are planning to do it. It takes time.
Right.
All this takes time.
Right.
We only see one important aspect, which is if you can create a business with ESG, with sustainability, and you do it properly, it'll be more successful than a business that is not done that way. Right. So ultimately, we see value creation coming out of ESG.
Okay. Now, other thing, what is the involvement of the board? Do they leave it to the management, or tell us about the board part? Are they well equipped to understand, the technicalities of, the environment and other issues?
I think again, boards are also, I would say, learning and growing on this topic. A lot of external experts out there who boards are employing to understand how they should govern the companies. And more importantly, as the track record of the board improves, they're also adding members to the board who are experts in several fields.
Right.
And that's helping the boards govern better.
Now, any best practices globally, on the learning process? Anything can be done on the learning side for the board or the independent directors?
Absolutely. I think we need to have a lot more information exchange. There has to be compliance is also in its own journey, improving compliance, disclosure, trying to figure out what's the best way to account for many of these disclosures. So ultimately, it's like, when you think about any change that happens, like IFRS as an accounting change,
right.
It took a while for everyone to get to it, and they got to it. Similarly, disclosures for ESG are also getting there. There are standards being developed. There are many governments and companies around the world who have become members of developing these standards, and then these are being disseminated. So it'll take time, but the good thing is that I don't know of a single board in our portfolio that's not focused on this. Right. And adding the right capability set.
Right. Now, one last question on this net zero. We have targets for the company. Do you have any companies globally where we have company level target, for net zero? Anything you heard?
Yes, there are companies in our own portfolio who have targets, but the time they can achieve it obviously differs based on the challenge they have. Again, this is scope 1, scope 2, not scope 3. Right?
Can you tell us more about these companies? Would you like to mention?
Yeah, I don't think I want to name them specifically, but sectors. Yeah, in their sectors in different in the power area, in the industrial area. There's several companies that have got these targets out there. It may not be net zero in 10 years, maybe in 20 years, but there's clearly a path to neutrality and then getting it to net zero.
Okay. And in India, we have also seen, a lot of mutual fund. I think there are close to a dozen mutual funds focusing on ESG funds. Do you think they also have a role to play, or it's pure like just they have packaged it as a ESG fund?
No,
or globally, maybe you can give some global perspective also.
I think this goes back to the point I was making, that if sustainability is done properly, it'll create more value.
Right.
So these ESG funds are focused on that, trying to find businesses that they regard as positively inclined towards getting an outcome from good ESG efforts, whether it's environment or social or governance, and they believe that'll create value. As against being a mutual fund that's investing in a business because they think they'll create value just from the business as a whole.
Right.
So ESG is a part of that business.
Right.
And the focus is see how much of that ESG change is going to create the value.
Right.
So yeah, I do think I don't think it's only words. I think there are people who go deep into the matters of ESG, and then there are people who look at ESG as a part of the whole investment thesis.
Right.
So that's how they differ.
Right. So thank you, Ravi, for a broad perspective of many of the issues we are confronted with on the ESG side. And thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks for being here.
Thank you.